What's up everyone, my name is Dave and today I'm going to show you how I made this modern style aquarium stand using inexpensive tools and easy assembly methods. A friend of mine asked me to make him this aquarium cabinet and said he couldn't do it himself because he didn't have a shop full of fancy woodworking machines like I did. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you how you could build a project like this using a really modest set of tools and some real easy joinery methods like pocket hole joinery. For this project I'm using birch plywood. It was the cheapest stuff I could get at the cabinet shop, and I'm painting this project at the end anyways, so it didn't have to be too nice. I'll start by laying out and marking all the parts that I'll need to cut out. Once everything's laid out, I'll use a guide with my circular saw to get good cuts on the sides, the top, bottom, and the back of the cabinet. I'm making all these cuts with the plywood laying on a hard foam insulation panel that I picked up from the big box store. This just makes it a little easier to manage the plywood and keeps me from having to prop it up on a couple of sawhorses. I'll finish up with the circular saw by using it to cut the doors to size and then a few braces that the cabinet will need. This piece is going to be the back of the stand, and I'm marking out for an opening that I'm going to cut in it so that I can run the pipes from the back of the aquarium to the sumps and filters that sit inside the cabinet. Once everything's laid out, I'll use a jigsaw to cut out the opening. Once all the panels and parts are cut to size, I'll use a sanding block and some 220 grit paper just to clean up all the edges from all the saw marks and splinters that might be left on the plywood. Once all the parts are sanded and finished, I'll set them aside and organize them to make sure I have everything I need and get ready to start the joinery. The aquarium stand is going to be held together with pocket hole joinery, and the first thing I need to do is to set up the pocket hole jig to drill into 3/4 inch plywood. Once the tool's all set up, I'll start by drilling the braces and the frame pieces for the cabinet. Next I can lay out the screw locations for the top and bottom shelves of the cabinet, and then start drilling the pocket holes in those as well. Now it's time for some assembly. I'm going to start with the front lower frame, or the toe kick of the cabinet, and I'll apply a little bit of glue to the ends and then screw the frame into the two side panels. Now I can attach the rear lower frame. These frames are going to also help hold up the bottom shelf of the cabinet, and I'll attach it the same way using a couple of pocket screws on each side, some glue, and I'll use a clamp to hold everything in place. Now I can flip the assembly over and attach the top front frame to the case as well. Now I can put the lower shelf in place and attach it with a few more screws. The backboard for the cabinet gets attached next. I need to drill a couple of more pocket holes for it, and then I can screw it to the case. Again, I used the clamp to hold the backboard in place while I squared everything up and installed the screws. With the cabinet mostly assembled, it's time to move on to the upper front face frame of the cabinet. This face frame is going to make it to where the doors and the entire front of the cabinet sit in one plane or flush with each other. The edges of this board are going to be visible from multiple sides of the cabinet, so I'm going to apply some edge banding to this. This stuff is pretty cheap and it's easy to install. You just have to prep the edges of the plywood with some sandpaper to get rid of all the rough spots or splinters, and then it's sticky back, so you can use a regular clothes iron to make it adhere to the edge of the plywood. I'll apply the banding to all four sides, and then I'll use a razor knife to cut away any of the excess hanging over the edge. Then I can clean everything up with a little bit of sandpaper and a sanding block. This next board is going to be the top of the cabinet that the aquarium sits on, and the edge will be visible on three sides here, so I'll apply some more edge banding to this piece. Next I'm ready to attach the top to the case, but I forgot to drill a couple of pocket holes. I'll get those drilled in real quick, and then I can set the case on the top, line everything up, and install the screws. Next, the upper face frame can be installed. I'll do that by drilling a couple of pilot holes through the back side of the cabinet and applying a little bit of glue, using some clamps to hold everything in place, and then driving in some screws. The bottom shelf of the aquarium stand is going to hold a lot of weight with all the filters and stuff sitting on it, so I'm attaching a couple more braces underneath of it to give it some extra support. Now with the top and the face frame installed, it's a good time to go ahead and sand down the whole cabinet. You can see where this cheap plywood and the thin veneer started to burn through with the sandpaper, but it's not a big deal since I'm painting it. The next step of the project is to make the doors, and all four sides of the doors or edges of the doors will be exposed at some point or another, so I need to apply some edge banding to these as well. Once I'm finished, I can sand both parts down. The next step is to install the hinges on the doors, and I'll start by laying out where I want to place them. The style of hinge I'm using requires me to drill a recess and locate some screws for where the hinges are going to sit. I'm going to use this jig from Craig to help me line everything up, but if you don't have this jig, you could just use the template that comes with the hinges that you buy at the hardware store. I'll get the first location drilled out, cleaned up, and the hinge installed, and then I'll move over and set up the jig for the second location. Then I can drill it out, get that hinge installed, and move on to repeating the process for the second door. This jig for installing hinges really makes the process a lot easier. If you're going to install more than one set of hinges, I think it'll pay for itself. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can purchase one in case you want to check it out. With the hinges installed, I'll take the doors over to the case, line everything up, apply a couple of shims so that I get an even reveal all the way around. I'll mark out the location and then drill them out and install the screws for the other half of the hinges. With this style of hinge, you could take the two halves of the hinge apart and install one side to the doors and the other side to the case, and then snap them together when you're done, but this way of installation that I'm doing here just works best for me. Once I got everything lined up, I'll go ahead and close the door and then check the gap or the reveal all the way around. I normally don't get it right on the first shot, but luckily these hinges have a lot of adjustment to them, so I'll follow the manufacturer's instructions, make the necessary adjustments, tighten everything back down, and I should have a good even gap all the way around the door. Once I got the first door aligned, I'll go ahead and move to the second door, repeat all the same processes, close them up, make sure that the gap and reveal's even between both doors, and then I'm ready to move on to finish. The inside of the aquarium stand is likely going to get wet from changing out filters and stuff like that, so for the finish inside I'm going to use a couple of coats of oil and water resistant primer. I'll just spray it on. I'll do that to the inside of the doors and all the surfaces on the inside of the cabinet. For the outside of the cabinet, I'm just going to use a black lacquer spray paint, and I'll apply 2 or 3 coats, let it set up overnight, give it a good sanding, repeat the process 2 or 3 times until I get a good consistent glossy finish. Once the paint's had plenty of time to dry, I'll reinstall the hinges and the doors to the cabinet, and this project's finished. To keep the modern look of the aquarium cabinet, we didn't install any handles or pulls. Instead, I ordered some push button releases, but they didn't show up in time to put them on for the video. But that does keep with the nice modern look of the cabinet, and I really like how this thing turned out. Well, this was a really fun project to make, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And I hope that I showed you that you don't have to have a woodworking shop full of equipment to be able to make a cabinet like this. The tools that I made this project with couldn't have cost more than like $150, and the circular saw, jigsaw, and even the cordless drill is probably tools that most people have laying around the shop or garage, even if you're not a woodworker. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and leave me a comment.